Hi there, and welcome to today's vlog. Now, you may remember that I've mentioned in the last two vlogs this book, a book called Jean Batten, The Garbo of the Skies, written about a famous in her day, a very world famous female aviator who broke records for solo flights. She was a very complex character. This is an absolutely fascinating book. On the one hand, she loved the adulation, the being the centre of attention, the important person in the crowd. On the other hand, she was a very secretive, a private person who often was rude to people, so she could escape to the privacy of her own home, and she moved around a lot. She didn't really seem to have a base. Her driving force was to become the best aviator in the world, and once that era of her life was over and she was no longer flying, she seemed to lose purpose. It's a wonderful book to read, but in some ways a very, very sad book, especially the way that her life ended. And I want to refer to a particular episode in her life. Jean Batten had a brother called John. He was, in his day, a well-known actor. He was in a number of films. But something happened in the 1930s. They had a major falling out, which neither of them really revealed what the cause was. But it meant that they never spoke again. But there was one particular poignant moment. Jean Batten was in Auckland. She was a New Zealander signing at a book signing in a particular shop in Auckland. It just so happens that her brother John, who lived in the UK, was on a world cruise, and it just so happened that he was in Auckland on the same day that Jean was signing copies of her book. And it says, walking up Queen Street one afternoon, that's in Auckland, his curiosity was aroused by the crowd outside a bookshop. He crossed the street and joined them. To his utter amazement, since he thought she was in Tenerife, that's where she lived at the time, he saw from the window display that his sister was due to sign autographed copies of her book that very afternoon. When he peeped inside the shop, there she was, instantly recognisable, despite the passage of nearly 50 years. So it's 50 years since they'd spoken, had any contact. He was looking at Jean for the first time since 1931. But the rift between them had festered for too long. He wanted to approach her, but he couldn't. Instead, he stood inside the doorway observing her for several minutes, and a fear of emotional consequences for them both. He was torn between the wish to go forward and identify himself and the fear of the emotional consequences for them both. His courage failed him. He turned on his heels and walked away. So there was that big chance to seek reconciliation after 50 years, but he couldn't go through with it. And the writer of this book says a sad and curious twist to this story came from Jean's tour guide and host, Ron Richardson, who said this: Jean actually knew that John was there in the bookshop that day. She told me so later. I could see that it had quite a profound effect on her. I don't know how she recognised him after all those years, but Jean was sharp-eyed. She didn't miss much. She said she was hemmed in by the crowd around the table where she was signing the books. She wanted to get up and go to him, but before she could do so, he'd gone. Anyway, that's what she told me. She explained about the flaming row, as she called it, they'd had all those years ago. She admitted that she had been the aggressor. Later on, she said she did say that day in the bookshop, she deeply regretted not having made the gesture. So there was brother and sister, not spoken for 50 years, both in a situation where they longed to make reconciliation, but both of them fearful to do so. They failed to take the opportunity to forgive. So much we could say on this. In a village near here where we live called Stainforth, there's recently been put up a memorial to those who were involved in the famous 80s miners' strike. And it says on that stone memorial, "We will never forget, we will never forgive." And it seems to me very sad when we hold on to that unforgiveness. Nelson Mandela said, "Forgiveness liberates us. It liberates the soul. It removes fear." That's why it's such a powerful weapon. When I was at school in the upper sixth, there's something happened between me and another pupil that meant we didn't ever speak to each other. It went on for quite a while. Indeed, it was never resolved while we were at school. Sometime later, I can't remember how long, after we'd left school, I just had that on my mind and felt that I need to contact this guy and say that I couldn't remember what the problem was, the argument was about, but I asked him to forgive me, and he wrote back and said he couldn't remember either, but we have patched up that differences long ago, and now we're friends on Facebook. And I want to encourage you, if you've got an unresolved, broken relationship, if there's something you need to deal with, then do it. That's what we're called to do. In the Lord's Prayer we pray, don't we? Forgive us as we forgive. So whether you need to ask forgiveness for someone or reach out the olive branch, I want to encourage you. Today is the day. God bless you. Thank you so much for listening today.